They left a dead puppy at a campout, but a stray cat did the unthinkable. The van rumbled along the cracked forest road as the trees grew denser, branches clawing at the sky like warning signs no one cared to read. Inside, 6 teenagers laughed over static-filled music, stuffing chips into their mouths, occasionally tapping at their phones even though the signal had died miles back. At the wheel was Derek, confident as ever, eyes hidden behind knockoff aviators, while beside him sat Maya, her legs up on the dashboard, humming tunelessly. In the back, Alex kept mostly quiet, staring out the window at the blur of pines, the cracked patches of snow still lingering on the forest floor even in early spring. His hoodie was pulled tight around his head. Earbuds in, though no music played, just silence. His eyes occasionally flicked to the small wooden sign they passed, half-rotted and skewed. "Stray Dog Hill, keep out," it read in faded paint. No one else noticed. Or if they did, no one said anything. Of course they wouldn't. It was just a creepy old name, a joke waiting to be made when Brian, who sat beside him, already had his phone ready, pretending to record a mockumentary about America's most haunted picnic sites, while Lena, all energy and sarcasm, rolled her eyes and dared the forest to try something. "It's just a hill," she said, "not like we're summoning anything." But Alex couldn't shake the pressure in his chest, that strange weight that settled there the moment they turned off the main road. It was like the trees got closer, the light dimmer, the shadows thicker. As they unpacked at the site, a clearing overrun with moss and old fire pits, the unease deepened. Still, no one questioned it. The camp went up quickly. 2 tents, mismatched sleeping bags, a half circle of rocks for their fire. Jason joked about raccoons stealing their food. Maya worried about ticks. Derek insisted he had brought enough beer to drown them all. By sunset, laughter echoed through the trees. Marshmallows burned on crooked sticks. The forest around them swayed in the windless dark, the silhouettes of tree limbs bending low as if listening. Later, while gathering kindling just off the trail, Alex noticed a shape tucked beneath the underbrush. At first, he thought it was trash, a dumped grocery bag, or maybe an old blanket, but then the smell hit him. Rot, thick and metallic. He called out, and the group gathered around as he pulled the plastic free with a stick. The bag was tied, loosely, and inside lay the tiny broken body of a puppy. Its fur was stiff with blood, its eyes glassy and wide, mouth slightly ajar as if it had died mid-yelp. A note was folded inside, damp and torn at the edges. With just one sentence scrawled in smudged ink, he didn't listen. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Derek let out a low whistle and said, "Okay, someone's messing with us." Maya stepped back, covering her nose. "That's sick." Brian took a photo before Lena snapped at him to stop. Jason kicked dirt at the thing and muttered, "Probably a prank. Creepy. But whatever." Alex just stared, hands clenched in his sleeves. He didn't say anything. Didn't mention how the sight twisted something deep inside him, something buried. He didn't explain why when his eyes burned or why his heart began to hammer. Years ago, when he was 9, he forgot to close the gate. His dog, Rusty, had bolted into the road, chasing a squirrel. The sound of screeching tires never left him. That guilt, the one he never told anyone about, came roaring back. And now it had a body. That night, they burned the note, buried the puppy far from camp, and tried to laugh it off. But no one really slept. Alex stared at the fabric ceiling of his tent, heart racing at every gust of wind. Somewhere out in the forest, a low, distant bark echoed faint, mournful. He told himself it was a fox, but then it came again, closer. A second bark, then silence. Jason, who had zipped out of the tent saying he had to pee, didn't come back. At first, everyone assumed he wandered off drunk, maybe passed out under a tree or tried to scare them. But when dawn broke and he was still gone, the mood changed. They fanned out to search, calling his name. But the only thing they found was a trail of footprints veering into the woods, Jason's boots, clearly visible in the damp earth. No footprints returned. They followed the trail until it vanished near a patch of ferns. Beyond that, nothing. Not a snapped branch, not a sound, just the trees, silent and ancient. Derek joked nervously that Jason had probably gone into town, but even he didn't believe it. Maya tried calling his phone. It rang once, then went dead. By noon, the group returned to camp, shaken and snapping at each other. Alex kept staring into the tree line. When he looked up at the trunk closest to the fire pit, he froze. Someone no. Something had carved words into the bark. Then they paid. Lena accused Brian of pulling a prank. Brian denied it. Maya began to cry, whispering that she wanted to leave. But Derek said they needed to wait another night. Give Jason time. Maybe he'd show up. Maybe this was all just a misunderstanding. But that night, the whispering began. No one else seemed to hear it. Faint, unintelligible murmurs, like the trees were breathing words. Alex lay awake, drenched in sweat, the air in the tent thick and unmoving. Then he saw it. Just outside the tent's mesh window, near the fire pit, stood a small black puppy. It looked just like the one they found. Same eyes, same folded ears. Its body shimmered faintly in the dark, as if not entirely solid. It didn't bark, didn't move. It just stared at him. When Alex sat up, heart thundering, the puppy tilted its head, then turned and walked slowly into the woods. The next morning, he didn't mention it. He didn't have to. On a flat stone near the fire, someone had etched new words in dirt. Listen. Then, on the third day, carved into a log, or follow him. The group fractured. Lena wanted to leave immediately. Maya insisted on staying until help arrived. Derek tried to laugh it off but kept glancing over his shoulder. Brian grew quiet, withdrawn, rubbing his hands together until his knuckles bled. That night, Alex saw the puppy again. It stood at the edge of the clearing, tail still, eyes locked onto his. When he took a step forward, the puppy nodded once and disappeared. As he wandered deeper into the trees, the wind carried faint echoes of crying. Then he saw at a clearing with a ring of half-buried stones. At the center, an ancient sigil, a dog's fang, and a single eye, carved into a flat slab. Dried blood marked the center. Alex backed away, his breath fogging the cold air. The next morning, Brian woke screaming. The group rushed over to find him trembling, covered in sweat. "I told him to come back," he muttered. "I told him. I didn't think he'd go into the road." No one understood what he meant. Alex did. The guilt in Brian's voice matched the weight in Alex's chest. Something was unfolding, something old and angry. On the fourth morning, they found a dog collar resting exactly where they first found the corpse. It was clean, almost polished. The name on the tag read Jason. Maya screamed. Lena refused to sleep that night. Brian paced, muttering to himself. Alex didn't sleep either. He stood by the trees, watching. The puppy was back. But this time, Alex didn't just see it, he heard it inside his mind. A whisper that wasn't sound. The guilt must be carried or passed on. He followed the whisper deeper into the forest until he tripped over something solid. A leather notebook, warped and wet, lay open in the mud. Inside were diary entries, dozens each from a different hand. All told the same story: a camping trip, a dead dog, a vanishing, always one survivor. The final entry was scrawled in dried blood. "It's not the dog, it's the sin. You carry it or pass it." Alex closed the book with shaking hands. Back at camp, only he and Brian remained, and time was running out. The sky had shifted. It wasn't something you could point to. There was no storm, no sudden gust, no crack of thunder, but the air had changed in a way that tightened every breath like it had to be earned. The forest around the campsite no longer swayed lazily with the breeze. Now it loomed, pressing inward like a slow-closing fist. The remaining four, Alex, Brian, Lena, and Maya, sat in a silent semicircle around a dying fire, the smoke curling upward like a question no one could answer. Jason was gone. Derek had stormed off after a heated argument with Lena earlier that day, saying he'd walk to the car and drive back into town for help. He hadn't returned. His boots were gone, his bag untouched, and now they were down to four. Maya's eyes were hollow. She sat cross-legged, clutching her jacket like it could hold her together, occasionally muttering under her breath as if speaking quietly enough would trick the fear out of her chest. Lena hadn't stopped pacing for hours. Her hands shook when she talked, and she had stopped cracking jokes altogether, even Brian. Once the group's confident, loudmouth center had fallen disturbingly quiet, he sat near Alex but slightly apart, hunched forward, eyes fixed on nothing. Occasionally, his lips moved silent words rehearsed in a memory he didn't want anyone to see. Alex hadn't told him about the notebook. Not yet. The words inside still spun in his mind like blades. It's not the dog, it's the sin. You carry it or pass it. It echoed with that voice he had heard in his skull, a voice that wasn't quite human, wasn't quite animal. He remembered the black puppy staring at him, then turning away, as if leading him somewhere. He had followed it, compelled not by curiosity but by guilt, and now he felt something following him in return. That night, as Lena and Maya finally slipped into a fragile, exhausted sleep, Alex sat awake beside the embers. He couldn't stop staring at the edge of the trees, where the world faded into black. Brian sat opposite him, motionless, until he suddenly spoke without looking up. "Do you think it's the place?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Or do you think it's us?" Alex didn't answer immediately. He felt the question crawl down his spine. "I think," he said slowly, "it finds whoever it needs." Brian nodded, as if he already knew. Then he said something that made Alex freeze. "I think it came for me." Alex's breath caught. He turned to face Brian, who still hadn't lifted his head. "Why?" he asked carefully. Brian was silent for a moment. Then, in a tone barely above the wind, he said, "There was a puppy. It followed me home once, months ago. Wouldn't stop barking at my door. I didn't want to deal with it. I threw rocks. I drove it out into the hills, near the turnoff to the creek road. I left it there. I told myself someone else would find it." Alex's heart sank, the weight in his chest tightening into something solid. "That was near here," he said quietly. Brian finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, glassy. "I didn't mean for it to die." Alex thought of the note. He didn't listen. He thought of the carved messages, the collar, the whispers. But it did. Brian nodded, slow and painful. "I keep seeing it, Alex. Not just in dreams. I see it when I close my eyes. I see it in the trees. I hear it crying. And that voice, it keeps telling me it's my turn." Alex stood up, his legs trembling. He wanted to scream, to run, or to do anything but stay. But something in him said that running wouldn't work. "Not here. Not anymore, boy. We need to leave," he said. "We need to go now." But when they tried to wake Maya and Lena, it was too late. Maya was gone. Her sleeping bag lay crumpled, torn at the zipper, her flashlight still glowing faintly beside it. Lena was sitting up, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Her voice had left her. She clutched Alex's arm with both hands, her body trembling violently. She couldn't speak, couldn't explain. Only point to the woods, to the dark. Alex found Maya's footprints, light, bare, weaving toward the trees like she had been sleepwalking. They vanished after 30 feet, swallowed by the underbrush. Brian backed away from the scene, his face pale as ash. "It's picking us off," he whispered. One by one, like punishment. Lena collapsed to her knees, sobbing without sound, as if her throat had been stitched shut. Alex pulled her close, holding her like he would a child, whispering calming words that felt meaningless. They built another fire, stronger this time. They didn't sleep. At some point during the night, Lena fell unconscious, her breath shallow, eyes darting beneath her lids. Alex wanted to believe she was dreaming, but part of him knew she was being pulled, mentally, slowly, like something was unthreading her from inside. Brian didn't speak again until sunrise. "I think I know how to stop it," he said. "It's not going to stop," Alex replied. "Unless someone pays." "I'll do it," Brian said. "I'll take it back. I'll go to where I left it. Maybe that's where it started. Maybe that's where it'll end." Alex wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. A part of him knew that what Brian said made sense. Or maybe it was just what the thing wanted them to believe. As the morning light stretched across the campsite, Brian packed his bag. He left behind his phone, his flashlight, even his jacket. Just walked, slowly, toward the east, toward the creek road and the hills where he had once left the puppy to die. Alex watched him go until the tree swallowed him whole. Then he turned back to the campsite. Lena was awake, her voice still gone, her hands shaking as she clutched the leather notebook Alex had hidden beneath his sleeping bag. She opened it to the final page, pointed to the blood-scrawled line. "It's not the dog, it's the sin. You carry it or pass it." Her eyes found Alex's, wide with fear and something else accusation. "What do we do?" she mouthed. Alex didn't answer. He walked to the edge of the clearing, stared into the woods where Brian had disappeared. The silence there was too complete, too final. A rustling sound made him turn. And there, once again, stood the black puppy, watching, waiting. This time, Alex didn't approach. He simply stood and stared back, the air between them thick with the weight of choice. He understood now. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a judgment. One sin, one victim, one survivor, unless someone broke the cycle. The puppy tilted its head. The wind stopped. Alex's hand dropped to the dog collar that now hung from his belt. Not Jason's, not Brian's. This one bore no name, just a tag engraved with a symbol, a single eye, and a tooth. He hadn't seen it before, but it had been there all along, waiting. And now it was his turn to choose. The collar was heavier than it should have been. Alex held it in his hand, the metal tag clinking softly as he turned it over and over, the engraved eye and tooth catching the morning light like it didn't belong in this world. Behind him, the forest lay quiet, still, indifferent to the fact that three of them were gone and one was slipping away. Lena sat in the dirt by the fire, knees hugged to her chest, her eyes wide but unfocused, lips slightly parted as though she wanted to speak but had forgotten how. Her voice hadn't returned. Maybe it never would. The silence between them was a living thing now, stretching and curling like smoke through the trees. Alex crouched beside her and tried to smile, but it came out as a tremble. "We'll leave soon," he whispered, voice hoarse from a night of no sleep and too many unanswered questions. "We'll get out of here, I promise." Lena didn't blink. Her gaze remained on the collar in his hand, as though the metal had rooted her in place. Alex slid it into his pocket and stood up, every part of him aching. His head throbbed, his chest felt hollow, and there was a pressure in his ears like the world was about to scream. The air smelled like old rust and wet bark. He glanced to the east, in the direction Brian had gone. There was no sound, no movement, nothing to say whether he had made it to the place where it all began or whether the forest had claimed him too. Alex looked at the fire pit, then the tents, then at Lena again, and a terrible thought slid into his mind like a whisper through dry leaves. What if there's never been an exit? What if it's not just the hill that's cursed, but the ones who set foot on it? He shook the thought off and began packing. He moved slowly, methodically, stuffing gear into bags that suddenly felt too heavy, zipping tents that no longer sheltered anyone. Lena didn't move, just kept watching him. When he reached for her pack, she flinched. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. We're leaving." She finally looked at him. Her eyes brimmed with something he couldn't name: fear. Yes, but also expectation. She reached into her own coat and pulled something out, the notebook. She held it like a relic, a cursed scripture, too dangerous to read again, but too important to destroy. She opened it slowly, turned to a page somewhere near the center, and handed it to him. Alex took it, brow furrowed. The entry was scrawled, angry, almost desperate, fourth night. "We thought it was just guilt, but it's a pattern. One is taken, then another. It doesn't stop because it doesn't want closure. It wants echo. It needs witnesses, someone to remember." Below that, scribbled in red pen, "The survivor carries the memory," or the blame. Alex closed the book and looked up. "It's choosing us, one by one, and it's not random." Lena nodded slowly. "So why am I still here?" he asked. Her eyes dropped to the collar in his pocket. Alex swallowed hard. "Because I haven't made my choice yet." The wind stirred then, sharp and sudden, rustling the leaves in a tight, spiraling pattern around the campsite. The fire let out a hiss and died. A shadow passed over them, brief, impossible, and when it lifted, Lena was standing. She looked different, not older, not stronger, just ready. She walked toward the path without a word, her boots crunching softly in the underbrush. Alex called after her, but she didn't turn. She moved like someone following a voice only she could hear. He ran after her, catching up just as she stopped at the edge of the clearing. "Where are you going?" he demanded, but she didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat again and pulled out a second collar. Alex froze. It was identical to his. Same weight, same symbol, same metallic chill. She held it out to him with trembling hands. "I found it under my sleeping bag," she mouthed, "this morning." Alex stared at the collar, then at hers, then back at the path ahead. "It's splitting us," he whispered, "offering both of us the same deal." He didn't want to ask the question, but it came anyway. "What did you do?" "Lena." She shook her head violently, eyes wide. "No, not her, not that." "Then why are you marked?" he pressed, her shoulders slumped. She pointed to the forest again, to where Brian had gone, and then pointed to her own heart. Understanding crept in like cold water. She didn't do anything, but she knew. She knew what Brian had done. Maybe she was there. Maybe she saw it. And she said nothing. The guilt wasn't always in the act. Sometimes it was in the silence that followed. The wind picked up again, and this time it carried a sound low, guttural, almost canine, a growl wrapped in a sob. Alex turned toward the trees, and there it was again, the black puppy, standing at the tree line, unmoving. But now it wasn't alone. There were more of them, shadows with eyes, too tall to be animals, too wrong to be human. They stood behind the dog, waiting, watching. Lena gasped silently and stumbled back. Alex stepped forward. The puppy didn't move. Instead, it sat down, calmly, like it had all the time in the world. "What do you want?" Alex whispered. His voice vanished in the wind. The shadows flickered. The dog tilted its head. And then Alex felt it pressure behind his eyes. A voice that wasn't a voice, slithering through his mind. "You were the one who left the gate open." His knees nearly buckled. It couldn't know. No one knew. It had been years. He had never told anyone. But now it was inside him, dragging the memory out like a blade. Rusty, the old beagle with one ear, the open gate, the squirrel, the queer, the scream. Alex dropped to his knees, tears springing to his eyes. "It was an accident," he said. "I was a kid, but you never told." The voice answered, "And you let yourself forget." Lena crouched beside him, clutching his sleeve. Her collar dropped to the ground between them with a soft thunk. Alex looked at it, then at her, then at the shadows. "What do we do?" he asked. She mouthed one word: "Choose." The shadows surged forward a step. The puppy stood. The wind died. The forest waited. Alex looked at the two collars in the dirt, then into Lena's eyes. She was ready to take the blame, ready to end it, even if it wasn't hers. And for the first time, Alex realized what it truly wanted, not a sacrifice, a confession. The wind whispered, "Someone must carry it." Alex stood slowly, picked up both collars, faced the puppy. "I did it," he said. "All of it, the gate, the silence, the forgetting." The puppy stared. The shadows halted. "I'll carry it," he said again, louder. No more passing, no more hiding. The collar in his hand grew cold, then light, then dissolved like ash between his fingers. The wind stirred the trees. The shadows vanished. The puppy blinked, then turned and walked away. Lena collapsed beside him, gasping like she'd been drowning and had just broken the surface. Alex didn't feel relief. He felt hollow, emptied, as if the forest had taken something from him but left him alive to remember it. He looked at Lena. She was crying now, soundless sobs that shook her whole body. "It's over," she whispered. Alex wasn't so sure, but he helped her up, and together they walked back toward camp. The sun had risen higher. The shadows were shorter, but behind every tree. He swore he still saw a tail, a flicker of fur, a glint of teeth. Memory wasn't always a punishment. Sometimes it was the price for mercy, and he would carry it as long as it took. They didn't speak as they walked, not for minutes, maybe not for hours. The trail was unfamiliar, though Alex had seen it before in fragments of dreams and half-remembered thoughts, the kind that sit behind the eyes and whisper when the world goes quiet. Lena walked beside him, shoulders hunched, the notebook clutched to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her real. The forest, once a place of mystery and hushed beauty, now felt sentient. Its silence had shape and direction. Its shadows moved in rhythm with their steps. Alex felt it watching. Not with eyes, not exactly, but with memory. Like the trees themselves remembered every step taken on their soil, every secret left unspoken, every sin unatoned. He glanced at Lena, and she met his gaze for a brief moment, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to say something. But whatever words she had died before they reached the air. Her voice still hadn't returned, but her presence had. There was a strength in her now, a quiet resolve that wasn't there before. They returned to what was left of the camp, and it was not the place they had left. The tents were deflated and twisted, as if something had pawed at them in the night. Their bags were intact but had been shifted, unzipped, opened, not stolen, inspected, as if the forest had needed to understand them before making its next move. The fire pit was gone, not extinguished, not simply scattered, but gone. The stones that made its circle had been taken, the ash wiped clean, as if the earth itself had healed over the wound. Only a shallow depression in the ground remained. Like a forgotten scar, Alex crouched beside it, pressing his fingers into the cold dirt, expecting something heat, energy. A whisper, but the ground was just dirt now. Still, his hand trembled when he pulled it away. Lena knelt beside one of the tents and opened a side pocket. Inside, wrapped in a crumpled sweatshirt, was a photograph. One of the group shots they had taken on the first day, just after setting up the tents, when the world still felt safe. Jason stood in the middle, flashing a ridiculous grin. Derek held up a lighter like a trophy. Maya was already pulling a face. Brian had his arm around Lena, who had clearly not been expecting the photo. And Alex stood just at the edge of the frame, half in shadow, half out, his expression unreadable. Lena held it up, her hands trembling. Alex took it and stared. Something was wrong. He could feel it before he saw it. In the far left corner of the frame, barely visible, was a shape, a smudge, a blur. But it wasn't the lens. It was too defined. It was eyes, two small, gleaming dots of white, nestled in the dark, watching. The black puppy. Alex flipped the photo over. Nothing on the back, no scribbled messages, no names. But the air had shifted again, like the world exhaled through its teeth. He stood quickly, stuffing the photo into his jacket. "We're not done," he said. Lena nodded. She reached into her coat and pulled out the second collar again, the one she had found under her sleeping bag. She placed it on a flat rock and stared at it. The silence stretched. Alex knew what she was thinking. The collars were invitations, not just marks. They were choices, and they had both chosen not to pass the guilt. For now. But the forest didn't forget. It just waited. "We need to find the source," Alex said finally. "Where Brian went. That's where it started. And maybe where it ends." Lena didn't need to write anything. She simply stood and began walking east, deeper. Back toward the trail Alex had seen in his dreams. The sun filtered weakly through the canopy, but the light never reached the forest floor. It was like walking through an old photograph, sepia-toned, scratched, fading at the edges. The deeper they went, the more warped the forest became. Trees leaned inward, unnaturally, as if drawn towards some gravity point buried beneath the earth. Birds no longer sang. Even the wind seemed reluctant to enter. After nearly an hour, they reached a clearing. It wasn't wide, but it felt enormous in its silence. At its center was a ring of stones similar to the one Alex had found days earlier. But this one was whole, untouched. And in the middle sat Brian, or what remained of him. He was seated on the ground, legs crossed, arms at his sides. His face was pale, eyes closed, mouth slightly parted as if breathing in a dream. He didn't move when they stepped closer. His hands rested on his knees, palms up, and in each palm was a collar. One was the one he had taken with him. The other was new. Brian Alex whispered. No answer. He stepped closer. Brian, it's us. Still nothing. Alex knelt, hesitantly reached out, and touched his shoulder. Brian inhaled sharply and opened his eyes. They were bloodshot, unfocused. He blinked slowly, like someone waking from a nightmare that hadn't ended yet. I stayed, he whispered. It asked, and I stayed. Alex swallowed. Why are there two collars? Brian didn't look at MOM because one wasn't enough. Lena stepped forward, eyes narrowing. She pointed to the circle, then to the trees, then drew a line across her own chest. A question. Alex understood. It wants us to choose again, he said, even after we already have. Brian nodded. It doesn't care about fairness, only continuity. One confession isn't enough. It wants repetition. Echo, Alex sat back, suddenly tired. So what happens now? Brian's eyes finally met his. Someone has to break the cycle. But not just by confessing, by remembering, by carrying it, by making sure it never happens again. Lena crouched beside Brian and picked up one of the collars. Her hands didn't shake. She placed it around her own neck and fastened the clasp. The metal glinted for a moment, then dulled. Brian looked relieved. It let me live, he said, because I told the truth. But it won't stop unless all of us do. Alex looked at the remaining collar. It seemed heavier now, as if it knew he was looking. He reached for it, hesitated. Brian spoke again. You don't have to wear it, but if you don't, someone else will. Eventually. Alex picked it up. The metal was cold, familiar. He stood, collar in hand, and looked at Lena. She nodded once. Then the air shifted again. A breeze, sharp and sudden, blew through the clearing, stirring the leaves into a spiral that rose upward like smoke. The shadows at the edge of the forest withdrew. The trees straightened. The silence broke not with a scream or a growl, but with birdsong, soft, tentative. The forest exhaled. Brian closed his eyes. It's done, he said. But Alex wasn't so sure. Because in the swirl of wind and light, he had heard something, faint, distant, a bark, not threatening, not angry, just waiting. The kind of sound that comes from something that's patient and ancient and still watching. He looked down at the collar in his hand. It no longer shimmered. It no longer felt like a weapon. It felt like a reminder. Lena placed a hand on his shoulder. No words, just understanding. They had all been part of something larger. And now, they were its witnesses, its keepers, as they walked back through the forest, retracing their steps. The weight in Alex's chest didn't leave, but it changed. It became purpose. A promise, one he would carry. For the doe. For Rusty, for those who vanished, and most of all, for those who would come after. Because the forest wasn't done. It never would be, not until everyone listened. They didn't speak as they walked the final stretch out of the woods. Only listened to the snapping of twigs beneath their feet, the murmur of wind weaving between the trees like a rumor of something watching just beyond vision, and the occasional bird call that sounded oddly too melodic, as if nature itself was trying to remember how to behave. The world felt lighter now, yet still wrong, like a haunted house where the ghosts had all gone silent but hadn't left. Alex kept the collar in his jacket pocket, where its weight was no longer physical but psychological, pressing down on his ribs, wrapping around his heart like a chain that wasn't made of metal but of memory. Beside him, Lena walked with slower, more confident steps. The collar she had chosen to wear sat at her throat like a brand, unmoving and matte, as if the forest had accepted her choice and etched it into her flesh with invisible ink. Brian followed behind them, quieter than before, his eyes raw from lack of sleep and confession. He had spoken little since the clearing. But when he did, it always sounded like a man who had been hollowed out and refilled with something heavier than guilt understanding. They reached the edge of the trail by midday, where their van still sat, partially obscured by the overgrowth. No one had touched it. No tire tracks suggested anyone had come looking. No animals had broken in. It was as if the vehicle had existed outside of time, a capsule waiting for its passengers to return from the other side of something ancient and unspoken. Alex opened the door and paused, staring at the driver's seat where Derek had once laughed and flicked bottle caps into Maya's lap. The memory came like a punch, his voice, her shriek, the way Jason had tried to mediate before Brian threw popcorn at all of them. They had been kids, just kids. And now they were survivors, or witnesses. Or maybe just leftovers. Keys, Brian asked quietly. Alex nodded and pulled them from the visor. He slid behind the wheel and started the engine. It groaned but came to life, reluctantly. Like even the van knew it was leaving something unfinished. Lena took the passenger seat, holding the notebook in her lap, fingers absently tracing the cover. Brian climbed into the back and closed his eyes. No one spoke for miles. The forest gave way to patchy road, then gravel, then pavement, and finally familiar landmarks, the cracked sign of a diner they'd passed on the way in. The rusted mailbox tilted like it was tired of standing. The gas station with the flickering open sign that never seemed to shut off. Civilization returned slowly, like a dream forgotten after waking. But the weight didn't leave. Not entirely. Alex pulled into the parking lot of the local sheriff's office just before sunset. The sky bled orange and pink, streaked with clouds that looked like smears of ash. He turned off the ignition and sat in silence. Lena didn't look at him, but she reached out and placed the notebook in his lap. Her eyes said everything, it was time. Alex nodded, swallowed hard, and opened the door. Inside, the office was quiet, the kind of small-town stillness that usually smelled of old coffee and floor wax. A tired-looking deputy glanced up from behind the counter, raising an eyebrow at the trio entering with soot-streaked jackets, wild eyes, and silence wrapped around them like funeral veils. "Help you?" he asked, setting down his mug. Alex stepped forward and placed the notebook on the counter. "We need to talk to someone," he said. "About missing persons," the deputy blinked. "Names Jason Romero, Maya Patel, Derek Lynn." A pause. "And maybe others." The deputy stared at them a moment longer, then picked up the phone. Within minutes, they were led into a back room, handed water bottles, and told to wait for the sheriff. Alex paced. Lena stared at her hands. Brian leaned against the wall like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes later, a stout man with crow's feet and a voice like gravel. He introduced himself as Sheriff Brannick and asked for their story, so they told it. Piece by piece, Alex did most of the talking. Voice steady despite the madness it carried, he explained the campsite, the beige thing, the puppy, the notes, the disappearances, the carvings, the collars, the clearing. He didn't embellish, didn't dramatize, just facts, cold and sharp, like bone. Brannick didn't interrupt, didn't scoff, just listened. When Alex finished, the sheriff leaned back in his chair and exhaled. "Stray Dog Hill," he said slowly, almost reverently. "Been a long time since I heard anyone say that name." Brian looked up. "You've heard of it?" Brannick nodded. "Back in the 60s, maybe earlier, folks stopped going up there. Said it was bad luck. Some blamed wolves. Others talked about hunters disappearing. But nobody ever had proof, just stories." Alex reached into his jacket and pulled out the collar. He placed it on the table. Brannick stared. "That was left behind," Alex said. "We don't know what it means." "Not exactly, but it chooses people, marks them, makes them remember." Brannick picked it up with gloved hands, examined the tag. "I've seen this symbol before," he murmured. "On old logs, things carved into the walls of cabins long abandoned. Thought it was just superstition." "It's not," Lena said quietly. Her voice had returned, cracked, fragile, but alive. Brannick looked between them. "What do you want me to do with this?" Alex took a deep breath. "Record it, keep it safe, tell someone else. Anyone. Just don't let it disappear." The sheriff nodded slowly. "I can't promise people will believe you." "Hell, I barely do, but I'll listen, and I'll keep this." He patted the collar gently. "You three, you did something most folks couldn't." "We didn't stop it," Alex said. "We just survived. Sometimes," Brannick replied. "That's the only thing you can do." They left shortly after, stepping back into the night that no longer felt as hungry as before. Lena took Alex's hand, not tightly, not romantically, just a tether between two people who had seen too much and somehow still stood. Brian walked behind them, shoulders slumped, a quiet whisper of who he had been. At the edge of town, Alex paused. He turned to the woods in the distance, their outlines softened by the moonlight. He thought about the others, their laughter, their faces, the way they used to breathe like nothing could touch them. He thought about the notebook, now resting in a drawer at the sheriff's station. He thought about the collar, about Rusty, and about the black puppy. It would be there somewhere, just beyond the trees, watching, waiting, but not with malice. No, with memory, because some sins didn't die. They echoed, repeated, like a howl across a valley, like a door that never truly shuts. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew this the forest would remember. And now, so would they. As they turned and walked toward whatever normal life remained, the wind shifted behind them, a soft bark echoed across the quiet, and Alex didn't flinch. He simply whispered, "I hear you," then kept walking.